Gentlemen, I want to welcome you to week 1 of Cover Me, Discovering the Power and Presence of Yahweh, the first in the series of battle books. I'd like to have you open your battle books to page 14, and I want to again lay out just kind of a detail of what each of these chapters, so the content that is held, and how you can navigate through this resource. You'll see that in the black print on page 14, we have an excerpt from Cliff Graham's novel, Day of War. And those black text will be highlighted all throughout this resource for you. So those are, again, our excerpts that we brought out of the Day of War that help bring about kind of a gritty intensity to the truth that we're trying to bring about. And below that, you'll see that we've listed for you Psalms 57, 4 through 5, and 7 through 8. My soul is among lions. I must lie among those who breathe forth fire. Be exalted above the heavens, O God. Let your glory be above all the earth. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises. Awake, my glory. And then you'll see below that we have a QR code that has overview underneath it. And again, you can utilize these QR codes to get an overview of this chapter, to give a quick 1 or 2 minute explanation of what we'll be going over in this specific week. And so again, if you've had one of those busy weeks where you haven't been able to get to the text like you'd hoped, that can be a real quick sneak peek on what discussion will be had as you come together with other battle buddies and discuss the chapter this particular week. So make sure that you're utilizing those resources, that you use the QR codes that we put in place, and that again, you're feasting on the raw stuff, you're spending good time in the Word of God, you're using the battle book as a supplement, that you're locking shields with other brothers, and that you're utilizing the resources that we put in place for you. So if you'd see on page 15, we've entitled this particular chapter, The Yearning. And what we do is we unpack for you that there's a yearning that every single man is born with. There's a yearning that every single man, woman, and child is born with. That a yearning to know that they matter, a yearning to know that they have purpose, a yearning to know what is it that I'm on this planet for. And so part of what we want to unpack for you this week is that yearning. Where did it come from? How is it fulfilled? How is it awakened if it's asleep? How does that yearning find its rest in really the person of Jesus Christ is what we're going to unpack as we go through it this week. So you'll see again on page 15 we have an excerpt from Day of War, and then we have some commentary around it of just picturing the idea of Benaiah jumping into a pit on a snowy day and killing a lion. Again, an epic story that every man that hears that story just raises up and sits a little higher, thinking about the intensity of what that must have been like, and what an incredible warrior this Benaiah must have been. And part of us, we yearn for that. We yearn for that same type of purpose and intensity about our lives. And I believe that you're going to see as we unpack in the next few weeks that this is yours for the taking. This has been designed for you. You probably won't be in a pit on a snowy day. You probably won't be surrounded by lions in the physical sense. But there will be things and areas and battlefields that this will become incredibly applicable for you. So what I want you to do for the next couple minutes is the men that are around you, I want you to press pause on the video and look at the question found in the bottom of page 15 and discuss this together for a few minutes. In your opinion, what is the most significant guy movie of your generation? And then the follow-up question will be found on the top of page 16. Why do you think that particular movie resonates with men? So take a few minutes to discuss these questions. Now that you've taken the time to discuss those, I pray that it was a good, solid discussion between you and the men around your table. And I'd be curious to know if there were a lot of the similar movies that came up, if there were a lot of a similar vein of movie, a similar genre of movie that came up. I would venture to say it probably was. As you can see, we have on page 16 that the core of this battle, the very core of this yearning that we have, movies and novels such as those in the Line of War series really do touch something inside of us. We may not be able to put our finger on it. We may not be able to explain it, but we know this something is real, both real and important. Hearing stories of warriors awaken our souls, a yearning, a desire, a vision, a need for something. And then I love this. The Hebrew warriors had a word for that something. written right to left, the word is kavod. In English, the word is usually written kavod and pronounced kabod. David used this word 51 times in 48 verses in his Psalms. Solomon used it 17 times in the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Abundance, riches are common translations. Honor, reputation, dignity seem to come closer to its meaning. Most English translations call it glory. And I want to pause just for a moment and wonder and ask even the question out to you. Do you desire glory to be awakened in you? Do you desire to be a part of the glory of God? Do you desire to be a reflection of the glory of God? As we propose to you, we believe those Hebrew warriors, they knew what that was. They knew that core of the battle is that they wanted to know that they were of something of value, of purpose, of vision. They wanted to know that they had a weightiness about them. And this word kavod, this word glory, really encapsulates that as we go along. The root meaning of kavod is to be heavy or to be weighty. More than half of the times the word is used in Scripture, it refers to a person who is honorable, impressive, and worthy of respect. Again, I believe that taps right into the heart of a man. We want to know that we're worthy of what we're about. We want to know that we have value, that we are a man that is worthy of respect. That's one of the things that really cries out in the heart of a man. And I believe that God has intrinsically put that desire for that kavod to be fulfilled, for that kavod to be awakened, for that vision and that purpose to be awakened. You see in Psalm 24, verse 8 and 10, who is this king of kavod? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Who is this king of kavod? The Lord of hosts, he is the king of glory. And so what we want to unpack for you is that this yearning, this longing to be a part of something bigger than yourself is going to be satisfied. It's going to be brought to fruition in this king of glory, in this king of kavod, in this king of worthiness and honor and respect and of awesome reputation. We're going to find this in the person of Jesus and see that he has in fact imparted this to us as his warrior sons. This yearning, as you can see on the bottom of page 16, it's a driving force for all of our behavior. We could spend just a few minutes analyzing and looking through and picking apart any of the decisions that we make, any of the behaviors that we are a part of, and we can see the driving force behind that is one of looking for kavod to be fulfilled, looking for a weightiness, looking for a value to be established. Every single one of the behaviors we can find a root in desiring those things to be fulfilled. So we're going to unpack that again as we go through this week. You look on page 17 towards the middle. This ever-present yearning in the soul of a man keeps us asking ever-present questions. Do I matter? Am I loved, accepted, respected? Is there significance to what I do? Am I protected? And probably most profoundly, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to accomplish the task that's put before me? Do I have what it takes to lead my family? Do I have what it takes to lead my wife? Do I have what it takes to lead those in my community, in my church, in my workplace? Do I have what it takes? So I want you to take a few minutes and again, answer some of these questions, ask these questions, and find an answer to these questions with your group that you see in the middle of page 17. Consider for a moment the men who you are closest to you. Do you think they're asking the above questions? Are these questions ever verbalized in your conversations? Why or why not? Do you ask these questions? If so, do you verbalize them to others? Why or why not? Take a few minutes to discuss these questions together with your battle buddies. Again, I pray that brought great discussion for you guys. I pray that it was something the Spirit of God used to give even some insight into yourself and some insight onto why we do some of the things that we do. If you would turn in your battle books to page 18 with me, and you can see the title of the first paragraph is Filling the Emptiness. At the dawn of human history, there was a season when man knew that kavod came from outside of himself, from Yahweh. We look at Adam and Eve and we see the purity before sin entered the world. They knew that glory could only come from outside them. They knew that it was only housed and found perfectly in the person of Yahweh. And the very first thing that you notice once Adam and Eve entered into sin is, what did they notice? They looked down and they saw they were naked. For the first time, their view turned inward. They looked to self to find their satisfaction. They looked to self to find their okayness. They looked to self to find their value, rather than on their king and serving of their spouse. And so you can see this with the entrance of sin into this world. The idea of filling this emptiness becomes a haunting pattern. It becomes a haunting reality that we have to have this fulfilled. We continue on with the text. It was the gift of life, the power and presence of Yahweh himself. But then we bought into the lie that somehow we could create kavod within ourselves. That we could create it in our own abilities. That we could create it within our, and no longer have to look other than. We could try and look to self to be self-sustaining. And it goes against the very design that God has created us for. We'll unpack later on in the study that of fierce dependency, that we are designed to be dependent upon the Spirit of God to accomplish his purpose and to accomplish his plan. And yet the presence of sin put a huge roadblock to that. It absolutely stopped the flow between the Spirit of God being our all in all to man looking to self to fulfill and find our own answers. One of the ways that we can reveal ways or certain strategies that we as men have entered into trying to figure out how to get our kavod fulfilled, how to fill the emptiness, is found in the middle of page 18. If I have blank, then kavod will be mine. What are some of the things that you put in the blank? We've given you 5 different P's that I want you to look at and we'll reference throughout this study. The first one is pleasure. So many times we will try and, if I could just have this level of pleasure, whether it be mental, emotional, or physical, to make me feel good, then I would be okay. Then I would be fulfilled. Then the emptiness would be filled. If I had possessions, if I had position, if I had power, if I had protection, if I just had these things like so-and-so does, or like so-and-so does, or if I could just do it better than so-and-so does, the emptiness will be filled. And yet what we find in our experience and what we find all through the annals of history is it has never been a satisfying, lasting filling of the emptiness. Because there's always more pleasure to be had. There's always more possessions to pursue. There's always more people with better position than we find ourselves in. The list goes on and on and on. And yet we see God allowed a broken system to enter into mankind and how we try and reason through for finding our weightiness, our value. He allowed a broken system to come into play because he knew that he would be the only fulfillment. He knew that he would be the only one that could literally awaken and fulfill the emptiness that we find. Think to yourself a bit. The question found on page 18. Can you think of other things that men use to try and fulfill their yearning for kavod? The list is endless. And I'm sure there's multiple things that pop up in your mind. And typically the examples that you give will be of other people. I want to challenge you to say, search me. Remember that in Psalm 139. Search me, O God. See the areas that I personally am looking to have my kavod filled, other and apart from you. Every man with a heartbeat is doing this right now. If you think about it, you can see how every action of every man is an attempt to fill in the blank so that they can experience the peace, meaning, purpose, and fulfillment of kavod. You look on the top of page 19. If you ask someone who knows you well this question, what are the main ways that you see me seeking glory or seeking kavod? How would you prioritize the list, with one being the most intense way that you seek it? I would challenge you as you go away from our study this week, or maybe some of the battle buddies that you find yourself in a table around, that you would ask the question, that you would ask those who know you well, how do I seek glory? How do I seek out kavod? What are some ways that I do that? And do purpose to go through and say, this is top of my list. This is where my tendency would be, is to go in this area to try and find kavod apart from God. Middle of page 19 says, when our strategies to find kavod fail, or when the temporary satisfaction of it fades, the haunting pain of the void and the yearning for kavod returns. It becomes one on a treadmill where it's going faster and faster and faster, and we can barely keep up with the pace, and it just seems like it goes more and more and more. That's what it's like whenever we run after something other than kavod that can only be found in the person of Jesus Christ. One way that we've seen as we've engaged the hearts of men to recognize the areas that really is idolatry, that we've looked to find kavod or value or weightiness from something other than God, can be in the question that we have on page 19. What makes you angry? I would challenge you to ask that question. I would challenge you to allow the Spirit of God to give great insight on what things make you angry. And if you're still struggling to find out what they are, ask a spouse, ask a close friend. What are some of the things that make you angry? And many times that can be a particular vantage point that if this is not fulfilled, I get angry. If I try and have kavod fulfilled in this area and it fails, anger comes about. It's been a great litmus test for men as we've engaged across the country to recognize these are areas that we're trying to find glory apart from God. So please spend some time with that as you navigate through that question. What I would like you to do from this moment forward is I want you guys to spend time in on page 20, Awakening Your Kavod. What I would envision is you could even read this aloud and walk through the rest of the chapter together. And then I want you to see on page 21, From the Heart of David. Each of the chapters, what we've done is we've gone and we've looked and seen some of the actual words from David that speaks to this yearning. And so at the end of each of your chapters, you'll see we've done almost a little devotion of sorts that comes straight from the heart of David. And then lastly, I want you guys to notice that at the end of each chapter, we have what we call our personal battle book entry. This will be a journaling type exercise that I want you to engage into, and will be very valuable for you to bring these truths that you hear, bring these truths that you read, and solidify them even further as you write out your thoughts. You write out what things come to mind. You write out the different verses that are brought up and how it had affected your heart. This will be a very necessary part for you guys as you engage the battle book in the next 12 weeks. So please make sure that you put elements of discipline and you put elements of effort towards the fulfilling of your personal battle book entry. What we've done, as you can see on page 23, is we've given you 5 days of battle book entry, meaning that we will come together this day and we want to give you another 5 days of repetition, of coming back to bringing a discipline in place of spending time in the Word. And so each of the verses that we laid out for you, typically we come from David and the words that he has from the Psalms and from the Proverbs. But you will see that each of the daily readings has a section for my thoughts about this verse. My call to action as I navigated through this chapter in God's Word. What's my call to action? What am I called to be about after reading this information? And lastly, my prayer in reference to that verse. My prayer in reference to that chapter. That God solidify the truths of what I just heard and the calls to action. Empower me to fulfill what you've called me to be about. So you can see on page 23, we have the first of 5 days. On page 24, day 2 and 3. And on page 25, day 4 and 5. And so I want you guys to, as you navigate through this week, spend time going back through the chapter, seeing the information that's there, and make sure that you put time into these daily battle briefings, these daily times of battle book entry, so that you can go back and reference, so that you can see the call to action that the Lord has put into your mind as you go along. So that's week 1 for the battle book this week, and I pray that it's blessed you. I pray now that you guys would go ahead and finish up, starting on page 20, the Awakening Your Kavod, and that as you guys wrap up the text, that you will do those 5 days in this next week, and then spend some time simply praying together, battling together in prayer, one with another. It's one of the most powerful ways we can lock shields as men together, is praying one for another. So spend some time praying together, and we'll see you next week with chapter 2.